Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Seidman, and welcome to Optimizing Aging. I'm here with my co-hosts and fellow 1997 Body of Work champions, Brad Wadlow and Drew Avery. And we're here to talk about some really interesting subjects today. Initially, we're going to speak about muscle building, and then we're going to talk about our results with the creatine, which Drew Avery was doing, and the hot and cold therapy, which Brad Wadlow was doing, and I'm doing the small molecule 5-amino 1-MQ. And then we're going to give you a little story from Body of Work, all of our experiences out there. We got something that we feel like would be a kind of fun story for you guys to hear. And then ultimately, we're going to talk about maybe processes that we are currently trying, or we're going to try something in the future. So we're going to go ahead and start with muscle building. And I'll go ahead and start with Brad. So specifically, Brad, what do you think are the most important protocols, techniques for someone to follow if their goal is to build muscle?
I think if building muscle is your top priority, I think that recovery's got to come first. I think there's two things that are 50-50, like the workout itself and the recovery in between workouts. So you need to train intensely with compound movements. I always used compound movements. Very rarely would I use isolation exercise, and regulate that high intensity exercise with recovery. Because I think what a lot of people think when they think the more I go to the gym, the better. But with me, it was more stimulate the muscle growth and then allow the time for it to happen. And I would test that by keeping accurate training logs and making sure that every exercise that I did, I was getting stronger on every single time I went to the gym. So compound movements, hard, intense exercise, and regulate the time in between exercises. And of course, nutrition. I mean, that's a big one in itself. You've got to get the protein, you got to get the carbs and the right fats in there. But yeah, and with the protein, I would always go like a gram per body pound when I'm wanting to build muscle.
Yeah, so I want to ask you a question about that. You see people training at the gym all the time, and you don't see a lot of muscle growth at the gym. You see a lot of people they're going there, they're doing their sets, and they're not building the muscle. So just because you're in the gym and you're working out, you're doing your sets, a lot of people don't build muscle. What do you think is the icing on the cake that actually makes you build muscle, or makes me build muscle, or makes Drew build muscle when they're working out versus an average person in the gym that really doesn't build much muscle at all? What is that one thing?
I think the main thing is people overtrain in volume and undertrain in intensity. I think you really if you want to growing muscle, building muscle is hard, and you've got to really give your body a reason to grow, and you've got to put it under that hard stress. And I really think that even though people work out, maybe they're not working out hard enough. I think intensity is a big factor in that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Brad in the sense that I think people just going to the gym is difficult. I mean, to do it consistently for a lot of people, let alone when you get there. Now you're pushing yourself, you're journaling, you're doing the things necessary to kind of monitor growth. I think most people get into the gym and they just simply want to do their routine, more of a maintenance, and they're not looking at other factors like changing up their workout. They're not looking at recovery. They're really not looking at their diet, and they're just there to kind of click the box off that they went to the gym. And I think that's a big part of it. You just cannot grow and create adaptation in the muscle unless you're, introducing new or greater stimuli. And then ultimately, you can't build muscle on air. or water. You got to give some nutrients there that can actually be, digested and ultimately used for muscle growth. And I just don't think people are putting those components together. It's just more of a, hey, I'm at the gym, I walked for 30 minutes, and hey, by the way, there's no problem with that. I mean, congratulations that you went to the gym in the first place. But I think from a muscles, and Jeff, being a trainer, I'm sure you can speak hours on this. Intensity and focus and dedication to muscle growth is probably not what most of your clients, are focused on when they go.
Yeah. So those are all valid issues, and from my experience, and also, I've researched this a lot. The research shows that if you're not training to within one repetition of muscular failure, either muscular failure or one repetition of muscular failure, you're not really going to put your body in a adaptation where it's going to be forced to build more muscle. So you have to place your body under a great stress where you're training to within one repetition of muscular failure. And I know this is where everybody falls short. They think, well, I do 12 reps and with this weight and I'm going to build muscle. Not true. If you've still got 2 or 3 or 4 more reps left in the tank, your body has no reason to build muscle because the stress load is not big enough to cause an adaptation. And this is what I see with 99% of the people in the gym, is they're just not training to within one repetition of muscular failure. And all the research, all the science shows that it doesn't matter whether you do 5 reps, 10 reps, 20 reps, 30 reps, or 40 reps. I've seen research go up to 40 repetitions where you will build muscle as long as you are training to within one repetition of muscular failure. So the high reps they used to believe worked only for endurance, untrue. It builds muscle as long as you're training to failure. And I see almost everybody I watch in the gym leaves reps in the tank on every single set. Number one, it's very uncomfortable. They don't like the discomfort, they don't like the pain, and just psychologically it's incredibly challenging to take it to that point. And that's why guys like you, Brad, you, Drew, and myself, we were in the top very small percentage of people in the contest because we train to that level when it comes to muscle building. So you could take all the protein you want, and if you're not creating then an environment by training to within one repetition of muscular failure, you're not going to build the muscle. So people make the mistake of thinking they need more protein. No, they need to train with more intensity. So Drew, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I do, and that is, because of the nature of my work, I am dealing with clients that are older and there are tremendous fall risks, and it caused me to take a closer look at what was going on there. And it ties into a conversation we've had in the past about you look at older people as they get older, they may be able to maintain upper body mass, but there's something going on that is infecting their lower body mass. And this is something I want to talk about in future episodes. And I think it's ideal for us because we are getting older, obviously. And there's lots of information about muscle growth on the internet. But when you really look at when you get older, again, what factors are contributing to the lower body in particular not growing like the upper body? And I know, Jeff, you've done and currently are doing some hormone replacement therapy. And you've even mentioned that your upper body's responding very well, lower body, a little bit frustrating. And so I'll be curious because you're going to be you're sprinting right now. And so I'll be curious as that continues, how your body will adapt, how your lower body will adapt. But going back to your training other individuals, I think everything you said was valid about intensity. I think we all, as we get older, may not, leave some reps on the table. But I'm curious, do you find that even in your own situation, do you find that it's a matter of you not necessarily wanting to take it to the same level of intensity, or do you think that you're experiencing some physical disruption, meaning as we get older, we just can't push as hard because we've got a back injury, a nagging back injury, or a knee or something that's really keeping you from not leaving an extra rep in the tank? And I think that's important to note is, are we as we get older, is this an issue of hormones and not taking the last rep that we need to take, that leaving one in the tank, or are there other factors like injuries typically as you get older that just don't allow that? What's your thinking on that? Because you've worked with younger people and older people. What are your thoughts? Does injuries play a big part in this, and even in your own case?
Yeah, well, so when I started testosterone replacement therapy, the reason I started was because I trained very hard. Even with very low testosterone, my testosterone was at 270, which is at the bottom of the scale. I was not recuperating the same. I still trained very hard. And I was just in a constant state of fatigue. I was not recuperating. And that was leading me to a mild depression just because I was in a constant state of fatigue. I wasn't willing to lower the intensity of my workouts. And by keeping the higher intensity, I was constantly in that state of fatigue. So ultimately what led me to go down the path of getting on testosterone was the recuperation. And the recuperation would improve my fatigue, and which would lead me to a better psychological state, better emotional well-being, because I was not enjoying my life as much because I was just fatigued all the time. So what happened was, when I went on testosterone, massive improvement, especially here. Your energy, your drive, your focus, your creativity, your passion. And to me, I've never had anything make such a massive impact on my overall life as testosterone. So now I could train at the level I was training previously, and I'm able to recuperate, and I'm able to feel good and have energy and look forward to my workouts, where I didn't look forward to my workouts for years because I was just fatigued. I was beat up all the time. It was complete drudgery to train. Now I'm excited because I get the same pump. I feel good, I'm energetic. And so the biggest impact was my ability to recuperate, and this psychological well-being, massive. And
but how did that play in? Well, I was just saying, because clearly, your upper body is just really way above average for our age. And you said you've had some frustrations a little bit because the legs have not responded as quick. And what do you attribute that to at this point? Because you're training hard.
Yes, right. So I'm training still the same. I will say the one thing I've changed with my training is I've lightened up the loads a little bit. So instead of doing 10 to 12 reps on everything, which can have debilitating issues with your joints, just training so heavy all the time. Now I train 15 to 20 reps. So I've lightened up the loads on everything I do. I stay in the 15 to 20 rep range, but I still train to failure. And my legs definitely are lagging. They're not responding like they used to respond. And I could probably get better leg results if I increased the volume of training, but Brad's going to talk about his cold therapy here in a minute, and increasing the volume of my leg therapy is as appetizing as taking a cold plunge. I don't really enjoy training my legs, although when I do train them, I train them very hard. It's just I think I need to increase the volume is what I need to do, but they definitely are not responding like my upper body.
Well, let me say this, guys. Like I'm still in the lower rep range on things, but but I got a very slow, like a 4 seconds up, 4 seconds down tempo. And I think this might be where a training journal could come in handy in some instances. Because let's say you do squats, say you're doing a squat and you got 8 reps, right? With whatever amount of weight. As long as you keep that nice, slow, controlled tempo, I haven't found any trouble with, it doesn't hurt my joints or anything. And I write it down in the journal. So I know when I go in there, I've got to get at least 9 reps with that same weight. So I just keep ratcheting up like that. And I think that's kind of the power of a training journal too. I think that can help people at our age, kind of grab that intensity still.
But that's interesting, Brad, because I've wondered, I'm intrigued with at your age, you're really you're in the sport that is very demanding. Obviously, the mountain biking and some of the stuff you're doing is amazing. And because you're journaling, do you find that your performance as it relates to competing? I mean, you have actual time measurements that can determine, if you're still on your game or if you're off your game. What have you found now that you're in your 50s? Have you been able to maintain, or do you find that there's a slight decrease as time goes on?
No, I'm still getting faster actually.
Wow, that's great.
And it's not in my head, and it's not necessarily a time on a trail, although I do time myself around all these different markers, and I still am getting faster as even still this year. But I've got what's called a power meter on my bike, which measures the amount of force that you put on the pedals, and it measures it in watts, and it gives you an average power for. It'll give you your best 5-second average, best 20-second average, all the way up to your best 3-hour power average. And I broke all those records this year. All my 60-second power, my 90-second power, and I've been tracking those for many, many years. But
well, see, Brad, you keep going back to this measuring, and it makes so much sense, because I know I'm guilty of it, and Jeff, probably you to a certain degree, because you've been doing this so long. Is you try to do this all internal. Hey, I know what intensity feels like, and all these different things, but I can't really put my finger on a metrics or anything that would compare what I did during, when I was in my 30s as opposed to now when I'm in my 60s. I suspect my intensity is not as strong. And it's interesting, Brad, because you're using an actual measuring device. So it kind of tells me that maybe to some degree, our limitations are just simply that we're not bringing ourselves up to those levels that we were when we were younger. I suspect that's part of it, is we're just not on a daily basis bringing our intensity up the levels that we did when we were younger.
I think so.
Now, what about size? What about muscle size for you in your legs? Do you notice any changes in your body?
I got to say, with the amount of cardio, if you want to call it that I do, no, I'm not definitely not bigger than I was before, but I'm just as strong or stronger in the weight room. But on the bike, I'm definitely stronger.
Wow.
Yeah, and
which is
where I spend most of my time. That's where I spend most of my focus on.
Interesting. Yeah, it just makes me feel like I need to wake up and start paying more attention in terms of monitoring what I'm doing, because I think
that's huge, Drew. I do. I think, and I still work out weekly in the weight room and train with weights, and I still try to make those numbers, even if it's a half a rep more than it was the week before. And I do a whole body workout. I'll start with the biggest muscles of the body and work down. And yeah. So even if I'm a half a rep stronger, I'm good with that.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic. I feel like I'm underachieving.
No.
So you guys, I want to go ahead. Were you going to say something else, Drew? Go ahead.
No, go right ahead, Jeff.
Okay. I was just going to say that I was also curious whether your quadriceps, your calves are bigger, because you see a lot of cyclists that are really high level cyclists, and they have pretty good sized quads and calves. And but you feel, I mean, you had good sized quads and calves just from working out, so you feel like you maintain, or you actually have they grown a little or shrunk a little, or you just maintain basically the same size?
I would say, if anything, maybe my legs have grown just a hair. They haven't gotten smaller for sure. From the waist down. Upper body may have shrunk some, but definitely not my legs. Yeah.
Well, I guess
Okay, you guys. So
before we
what I
leave,
want to,
before
oh,
I was going to say, before we leave that point, I'm curious, Brad, because you've been able to maintain it, have you had to make any adaptation in your either rest or protein intake as you've gotten older? Because as we get older, our ability to assimilate food into protein seems to be an issue. Have you had to make any changes in that area or those areas to maintain?
I don't get the same amount of protein in that I used to, but I do focus on high quality sources of protein that I do get in, but I don't do it like I did for the contest. I'm not taking that, probably half that amount now. Um, and I've replaced that with, I I eat a lot of carbohydrates, because I burn a lot of carbohydrates. I did a race the other weekend. It was a 50 miler, and I think my Garmin said, burn 5 or 6,000 calories in that. So, like,
Wow.
it's kind of a must that you've got to eat so many carbs. So kind of replace
okay.
replace some of the protein with carbohydrate.
Good.
Okay, guys. So let's move on to talking about the subjects we talked about last week. Last week we talked about he has implemented cold plunges, and he's implemented the sauna as well. And Drew's implemented creatine, and I've implemented the 5-amino-1-MQ, which is a small molecule. But let's start with you, Brad, on this one. What have you seen? What are the results you felt implementing these two methods of cold and hot therapy?
Okay, so I definitely took the plunge on that cold plunge, and it's something that I always wanted to do. And I knew all the benefits: increased circulation by when you hit that cold water, your blood vessels in the extremities constrict, and then when you get out, they dilate, and it flushes more blood and nutrients to the tissue. Um, it's an anti-inflammation thing, which you can almost feel immediately when you get in there, and just all of the other the other benefits that I had heard about, and something that I just discovered here recently, that your white blood cell count is increased by cold plunging. And there was actually a
Mm-hmm.
study in the Netherlands where um, they took two groups of people, and they weren't cold plunging. They were taking cold showers from 30 seconds to 90 seconds for 90 days. And the group that took the cold showers versus the group that didn't take the cold showers called in sick to work 29% less. So I don't know how scientific that is, but it's probably says something about white blood cell count. But anyway, I went out and purchased a 100-gallon tub at a farm supply store. Put 80 gallons of water in it, 60 pounds of ice, and I'm not exactly sure what the temperature was, but it was cold. And got in, and the first time I did, I couldn't get up over here, and it was pretty traumatic, actually, because it took my breath away. I had trouble breathing, and when it got close to 3 minutes, there was no question I had to get out of there. So I did a few, and I've noticed the more that I do it, the longer I can stay in. I did one today that was, I think I was in there for 8 minutes today. And
Wow.
so I did that, and just some of the subjective things with it. I know I did that 50-mile race that I was telling you guys about earlier. And I woke up the next morning and I'm scheduled to go work out with my friend. And I just couldn't do it. I was like, I'm, after a race like that for 6 hours, and, average heart rate was whatever for 6.5 hours. It was like average of 143 or something. It took it out of me. And I was like, well, let me go try a cold plunge. So jumped in the tub for 3 to 4 minutes, got out. Unbelievable how it made me feel. It's such a mind uplifting experience. I think the cold the cold water, the shock of the cold water produces endorphins, and you just instantly feel that inflammation going away, and you feel amazing. Got out, had a great workout in the weight room, which I've never done before the day after a race. So yeah, the just the good mood that it puts you in, the good feeling that you have. It's like something I was just experimenting. I was gonna try it, and for the show here, and it's definitely something I'm gonna keep and do for probably ever.
Can I jump in and
Well,
ask a few questions?
Yeah.
Because it's so. I told you, Brad, I was going to ask you some questions because this is of interest to me, and so let's talk about the. Uh, Obviously, it's tough to jump into a cold water, but once you did it, and now you knew what it felt like, and it was not an enjoyable experience. Now you have the mental part of this, knowing all future plunges are going to put you through this. But you mentioned that both have gotten slightly better over time.
Mhm.
Did you find that once you did it that first time, obviously, I think the cold was the more of the deterrent, but moving forward, did you find that it was mentally more of a deterrent to get in, or physically more of a deterrent to get in? Because now you know what the experience is going to be like.
Wow, that's a really good question, Drew. I'm not sure how to answer that because they're both bad. Like,
Yeah, I got.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's a tough thing to do. It's physically. I would say it's probably tougher. It gets a little tougher mentally, maybe, but I don't know. That's maybe a 50-50 there. It's a really good question. Um, I mean, I don't want to do it. Like, I still don't want to do it, but it's like, it's like anything else, eating right or working out. Like, it's not, you don't really want to do it, but the delayed gratification from it that you get, I have absolutely no problem getting in that tub. Actually, I did it this morning, and man, I just unbelievable how good it makes you feel. Yeah.
Well, to follow up on that, did you find like it's hard for me even to get into a cold shower in the morning as opposed to a cold shower in the evening. My body just is more sensitive. Now, you got into a cold tub of water in the morning. Was that rougher? Have you had a chance to compare the two? Is your body more sensitive?
Okay, so it is harder to do in the morning, and I think that might be because as you sleep, like you said, we were talking earlier before we started. Um, I got in at 3 o'clock in the morning before I left for work, and it was, I mean, it started my day off right. But I think when you're sleeping, your core body temperature reduces maybe a little bit as opposed to being in the middle of the afternoon.
Mhm.
So there's absolutely no question that doing them in the morning is a little tougher physically and mentally than doing it in, like, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon or sometime at night when your body temperature may be a little warmer.
Did you also find, now this is something I picked up from listening to Wim Hof over the years, but do you find that um, you're so just trying to deal with the cold that it's almost mentally chaotic as opposed to forcing you to be in the moment, almost a meditative state in a sense, the way they talk
Yeah.
about it? All of a sudden, all those, chaotic thoughts and constant stream of thinking that hits you all the time when you're in there, does it focus you down to where you're just in the moment?
100%, Drew. 100%. You are definitely in the moment. you really can't think. It forces your mind to think of one thing, and actually that one thing is breathing. You really focus on your breathing, and because it's so hard to breathe, and then that's so all you're thinking. You're not thinking about the troubles at work or what's going to go on later today or what you're going to have for dinner. You're almost like survival mode. You're trying to survive that terrible cold water. Yeah, but then afterward, it's. I mean, like I said, I'm going to do it forever. It's hard to do, but it's definitely worth it.
Now, a side question, and Jeff, I'll let you jump in. I'll give you I'm dominating the questions, but it's so interesting to me, and that is, as guys, as opposed to women, there are certain parts of the body that feel a little more tender than others. I know that if I'm cold plunging, that getting to the point of the groinal area is tough. How are you dealing with that?
It's funny that you say that, because Ken Farrell at my work asked me to say it. We were talking about the same thing, and a lot of guys have that same question. And you know what? The answer is kind of surprising, because you don't notice that at all. Like,
Really?
I don't know. Absolutely not. And I think it's because I thought it would do that. I thought it might be a little rough too in that area, but it wasn't. I think because when you first step in it, like I step in it and I maybe for a second, and then I just sink in it to my neck pretty quickly. And the water is so cold everywhere else on your body that you don't even notice it.
Interesting.
So one thing I want to say about actually icing your icing your testicles raises your testosterone levels. So that cold plunge actually will temporarily raise your testosterone. The other thing about the cold therapy is it does increase your white blood cell count, and increasing your white blood cell count is a sign of a stronger immune system. The other thing, there's a couple more things I want to mention. So the other thing it does is it increases your brown fat, and brown fat is not like other fat. Brown fat is massively beneficial to health and longevity, and it's really incredibly healthy, mitochondria-rich fat is what it is. And the last thing I want to say regarding the cold plunge is, whenever you experience something joyful or fun or exciting in life, you get an endorphin rush, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins. But after that excitement, you get a plunge, because we have a baseline when it comes to our feel-good hormones. We have a baseline. And whenever you go above that baseline, you get the same decline afterwards, and then you will ultimately come back to normal. The only thing they found that does not have that effect is cold plunging. It will give you the elevation in the serotonin, the dopamine, the endorphins, and you will stay up there for up to 3 hours. And then you just come back to baseline. You don't drop below. So they say it has the same kind of dopamine, serotonin spike as cocaine. And so it's just a feel good that you get without the decline with the endorphins. So those are some major benefits, but you have to suffer to get those major benefits. So Go ahead, Brad.
Another thing I've noticed, you were talking, talking about the endorphins and putting you way up here. Here's something else, and I always wear a Garmin watch, which measures everything: your sleep, your HRV, heart rate, constantly. What I've noticed. This is I'm not sure if it's from the sauna treatment or the cold plunge or a combination of both, but my sleep has been better these last 2 weeks than I think ever in my life, and it's got to be, some of it's got to be from that, I would think. Wow. Like I go to when I go to bed, usually I would toss and turn a little bit and lay there before I go to sleep. Now within 5 minutes I'm sound asleep, and I don't wake up until it's time to get out of bed. And that usually I wake up several times during the night before I started this.
Good for you.
My sleep is just like incredibly good.
touching on this immune system thing, what's interesting is, again, in observing our clients and as they're aging, what am I seeing that's just jumping out at me? And there's really two things. One, the lower body strength, as we kind of talked about at the beginning of the podcast. But the other one is resistance to cold. And I really didn't appreciate this until I just see it time and time again. And that is, it is amazing how the clients are extremely resistant to showering, because just the evaporation of the, when you get out of the shower, how cold it can be. And as they're older and declining, it gets worse and worse, and they get to the point where they don't really even want to get out of bed, because that just getting out from under the covers, they're cold. And it really hit me that if you can address two issues as we get older, I think it will have a significant impact on longevity. If you can, number one, you've got to be mobile. So you've got to get your lower body functioning. You cannot let that degrade or to the point where you're not mobile. But two, I'm increasingly thinking that you've got to increase your cold tolerance, because I believe there is a link between your ability to handle cold and your immune system. And as they get older, as we all get older, if your immune system is dropping and you think, well, I'm going to eat better and I'm going to exercise, but you're susceptible to the cold, I think that is a factor that people aren't fully considering. And so as we, I'm going to look into this further, but I really think that if a person, and it's tough to get somebody convinced to do this over time, but I really think that if you can keep somebody's tolerance to cold somewhat at the level you were in your, at least mid 30s, 40s, at least try to keep it in that range, I think it'll be tied to longevity. So for whatever that's worth. I did have another follow-up question, Brad, on the testicles on the cold plunge. Do you believe, because when you're riding a bike, let's face it, that is a point on the bike that is problematic? I mean, and do you think that over time you've toughened up, or do you feel like on long rides that's an area that gets agitated and the cold plunge actually helps? What do you think about that?
Yeah, like that. I mean, you are sitting on that little hard seat for extended. Like Leadville took me, it takes 9 to 10 hours, right? And you don't get off. But they're special made shorts that are with a pad and the seat of them, and there's a lot that goes into getting the right size saddle. It goes off of, there's a formula for measuring your sit bones and then getting the right saddle. And I guess I've rode for so long, I don't notice anything like that.
Amazing.
I don't have any problem with that. But if I did, I mean, the cold plunge would definitely help, I would think.
Right.
Hey, there's another thing about the talking about cold tolerance. I definitely knew before I started this. As you get older, I mean, it's kind of a well-known thing. The older you get, the less you can take the cold. I remember when I was watching a Super Bowl that was somewhere cold, or maybe it was a playoff game, but of course, Brady was the oldest one on the field, and he was the only one that was all bundled up. The rest of them were in short sleeves, and I remember making a comment that, look at him, he's all bundled up because he's older. He can't take the cold as good as those young guys.
Right.
But one thing I wanted to say, the cold plunge that I did, when I filled it with 60 pounds of ice, and where it's really, really where it's noticeably colder, I monitor my heart rate, and I'll start like a cardio session on my Garmin. And I remember the cold water with the ice in it, my heart rate dropped to, it'll initially spike when you first get in it. It'll go from 60 to 55, 60 to up to 85. And then it just drops like a rock. Like in the cold water, it dropped to like 41. And then I get similar readings, even lower readings when the water's, maybe 10, 15 degrees warmer. So the water doesn't have to be, you're talking, Drew, about like leading people into it. It doesn't have to be, the water doesn't have to be ice cold. I don't believe, because I got the same, at least heart rate effect from, water that was a lot warmer than some of the others. So I think as long as you get in it and it feels a little uncomfortable, it doesn't have to take your breath away, and like you don't have to feel like you're gonna, die of shock. Just as long as it's slightly cold and a little uncomfortable, I think you can still get a lot of the same benefit from it.
Do you think because now you're making me think about the amount of ice. I mean, you said you got a big tub. Do you actually still have to go to the store and buy big, packs of ice? Because you've done this numerous times now. You've got to prep it. So
it gets expensive. Like, but not. I mean, it's not too bad. I started taking all my gallon jugs that I drink water from, and I freeze them, and put them in. That's what I did today. I had 6 gallon. I had 6 1-gallon jugs that I put in there and took out the
That's smart.
So I just want to say one more thing before we move on to
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I just want to say one more thing before we move on to the next. Me talking about what I did. All the research on cold plunging shows you do not have to be in freezing water. You could go up into the 50s, but you just the colder it is, the shorter the duration. But you could go into the 50s and just stay in there for longer. You get the same exact results. And so you don't have to freeze somebody, even though in the 50s it's still freaking cold. But anyway, now I want to talk about So now I want to talk about I did the 5-amino 1-MQ, which is a small molecule that comes in a capsule, and I do 100 milligrams a day. And that 5-amino 1-MQ is really unique in that it's a performance enhancer. What it does is it slightly increases your ability to build muscle. It definitely improves your endurance, and what it does is it enhances NMT, which is N-methyltransferase. It helps regulate your NMT, and that improves your mitochondrial function. You hear it all the time. The mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell. So when you increase the NAD plus levels by improving your NMT function, that enhances your triglycerides. It improves your triglycerides. It improves your LDL cholesterol. It improves your insulin sensitivity, and it also improves fat burning. And so a lot of people take 5-amino as an addition to their fat burning plan that they're doing, because 5-amino is effective. And the great thing about 5-amino versus a peptide, most peptides are injectables. 5-amino is a capsule. So I take 1 capsule a day. I take 100 milligrams a day. The suggested dosage is between 50 milligrams and 150 milligrams a day. I went right in the middle. And I will say I've been on it for almost 2 weeks now. I started on Monday, just a little over a week and a half now. And I did notice I'm a little bit fuller and tighter. Just a little bit fuller and tighter. So I haven't weighed myself, but I've probably gained a pound. And so a pound is a lot to me. A pound of muscle is a lot to me because I keep my body fat low all the time. And for me, I haven't noticed anything in the fat loss because I eat, my nutrition is basically just lean proteins and vegetables. I don't do sauces. I don't do creams. I don't do any grains, and I do very little fruit. But it's just a lot of lean proteins and vegetables, and again, no sauces, no creams. A diet that makes it easy to stay at a low body fat, but yet give my body all the nutrition it needs to be healthy and live a long, high quality life. So the 5-amino, so far for me, I feel a difference. I certainly feel a difference in my recuperation, especially with my sprinting. And anyway, so 5-amino 1-MQ, I did it once before also, and I liked it. So I decided I would try it again and report in here on my results. And as I mentioned, it's got a lot of positive benefits, and it's a supplement. It's kind of a gray area. It's a research only supplement ingredient, so you have to get it from peptide websites that say that for research only. But anyways, it's been studied and used on millions of people, so it's a very effective, safe, small molecule to take. So anyways, did you guys have any questions for me regarding that anyway, before we move on?
Well, I mean, how much of that, I know, because we all probably to some degree, when taking supplements or have the placebo effect, I know that's an issue I had to look at when we talk about creatine intake. But this is relatively new for you, Jeff. Did you find that you felt like it wasn't the placebo effect to a certain degree? Did you feel anything mentally different? Did you feel more energized? Was there any subtle thing that you experienced you could relate to this new protocol you're on?
Yeah, so I've taken a lot of supplements in the past, and I don't really get the placebo effect. Most stuff doesn't work, and so I definitely, like I say, my muscles feel a little bit tighter, and I feel a little bit fuller. So I look in the mirror when I'm working out, my pumps are a little bit better and bigger, and then definitely when I'm out at the field doing my sprints. I usually sprint 100 yards and then walk back 100 yards and then sprint 100 yards. And on the walk back, that's when I would do my recuperating, and I recuperate faster in the walk. So halfway through the walk, I'm recuperated, whereas it took me the full walk back, the 100-yard walk back, to recuperate. So definitely an improvement in endurance and recuperation. Definitely that.
Oh,
well, how about this?
I like the sound of that, Jeff.
No, I knew you would.
So,
I knew you would.
Yeah, maybe I think I'm going to give that a try. So you notice like your heart rate lowered on your walk back, and you just felt fresher and ready to sprint again quicker, correct?
Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, getting back to normal was 50% faster. 50% faster. So if you added all these adjuncts, if you added your cold therapy, your sauna, you took 5-amino-1-MQ, and you probably don't need it, but if you got on testosterone, you'd go from being the top 10 to number 1 probably, if you got on all of that.
I'm all about it. Let's do it.
Me.
Jeff, when you started going back to sprinting, because we talked about muscle building at the beginning, but do you find that you're causing the muscles to explode? I mean, it's clearly a different training regime than a controlled weightlifting environment. So now you've taken your body into this different arena and you're pushing. Now you're really pushing those muscles. Did you find, especially at first time, that your legs and your glutes were actually feeling weak, almost as if you were using a whole set of using your muscles in a different way that they weren't being used to moving and exploding in? Did you feel that difference?
No, not at all. Just because I'm very consistent with my leg training, and I thought I might feel sore or something. And I will say my calves definitely got sore because I'm not used to exploding off my calves. But in the beginning, when I first started sprinting, I just, number one, I pulled a lot of hamstrings in the beginning because I'd get overzealous, and I knew I should start slow and just sprint at 50%, then ultimately work up to 60, then 70. But I'd sprint a couple times at 50%, and I'd say, let me see how fast I can go. Pull a hamstring. So I pulled my hamstring, and I pulled a little bit in the calves a couple of times because just by being stupid, wanting to feel like I'm 20 years old again. And so I pulled a lot of muscles, and but I didn't get the soreness. I thought I might, but I didn't. And what changed for me is I went to YouTube and I looked at a couple videos on proper sprinting form. And once I watched those couple videos on proper sprinting form, I got faster, and I wasn't tight. I was tightening up like this, trying to run as fast as I could, and that was slowing me down. And so, I felt like I recuperated no problem, and I felt like I was strong enough to sprint at full speed, but I was pulling muscles, and so I had to slowly build my body back up to it. So now I can sprint at full speed, but still I'll do my first 2 sprints at 50%, and my third sprint at 70, and then by my fourth sprint, I'm going 100. But even then, at my fourth sprint, when I'm going 100, I still am a little nervous about pulling a hamstring or pulling a calf a little bit. But after I get a few runs in, my body feels really good, and my strides are long. It feels incredible. I love sprinting, full speed, full stride. It feels so good. It makes me feel like I'm 20 years old again.
And Brad, for you, I was going to say, do you sprint? Because biking might not translate well necessarily 1-to-1 with sprinting. Have you tried it, and how did you feel? Because you're highly trained for biking.
I have done a few sprints before, not regularly like Jeff does, but you guys might think this is kind of interesting. Part of my regular training on the bike is sprints on the bike. Like, and I'll go for 15 seconds. I won't go for a distance. I'll go uphill and for 15 seconds and put it in a real hard gear and just go and keep it in that one gear and just put my head down and just give it absolutely everything I got. What I actually do is with that power meter we was talking about earlier, I'll see how high I can get that power. Like I'll, try to hit 1,000 watts on it. And that, you can tell how hard you're sprinting like that. But yeah, I don't sprint all the time on foot, but I definitely always sprint on the bike and for 15 seconds at a time. And I'll do several of those.
Wow. Interesting.
So
yeah,
Drew,
Jeff, it'll be interesting to see when you.
Yeah.
I was just saying, now as you keep sprinting,
Go
it'll
ahead.
be interesting to you'll pay attention to your leg size, because I suspect if you keep doing it, you're actually going to be stimulating muscles that you're not typically stimulating in your weight training workout, and that may create more size for you.
Well, yeah. So one thing I do want to say regarding that, if you look at long distance runners, they're small framed, toned people, but you look at sprinters, they're jacked and they're ripped, and so completely different muscle responses from doing high intensity blasts versus long duration exercises. So so I'm curious about that too. I'm curious, but so Drew, let's move on to you. You're doing creatine. Let's talk about your experience with that.
Yeah, and I'm doing it different than probably most people, in the sense that a lot of, when they do this, they're typically doing heavy weight training for the purpose of building mass. And I'm not doing heavy weight training right now. That's kind of making me different than both of you, in the sense that my training regime has been focused on creating skeletal and muscular symmetry. Mainly because I'm seeing the asymmetry or the muscles imbalances only contribute to more damage and injury, especially as we get older. Because you see so many of these older guys, congratulations for them being in the gym. It's fantastic. But they can't push into the weights, and when they start pushing into the weights hard, that's when the breakdown starts occurring. So I'm not doing that. So my analysis of creatine is a little different in this sense. I guess I'm about 3.5 weeks in this now. What I noticed is I'm maintaining about 3 more pounds, meaning, yes, I'll have some weight fluctuation as it relates to water retention, but in looking at this over the 3-week period, my base weight has gone up approximately 3 pounds. And I've noticed subtly clothing being a little tighter and the pants being a little tighter in the thighs. So that tracks out with what people typically experience with creatine. So that's been good. But here's, from a strength standpoint, what I was surprised to find is that right now I am taking my joints and putting them in kind of the most biomechanically inefficient position, like in a deep squat, right in that hip. That's not a strong position to come out of. But I know that my left side is a little weaker than the right, so I'm focusing on taking my joint to the farthest extent I can with no momentum. Can I push into that strictly relying, again, no momentum? Can I be in that deepest possible position on my left hip and drive out of that? Or can I sit in a chair or a box squat with no momentum and literally push myself out? And what I'm finding is I am having better success or noticeable difference in taking myself in positions where I might have to slightly kind of get a little momentum to get that movement and actually just sit there and then drive out of that position, and fully testing the strength of that movement when the joint is not in a biomechanical advantageous position. And so I would have to say, subtly and without a placebo effect or keeping a notebook, I notice specifically that when I put myself in positions that are not easy to drive out of, it's easier, subtly. So I would have to say it tracks with when you're in weight training and you're really pushing your body. That's where I felt like I saw the benefits of creatine at its maximum. But it's encouraging, though, because they say as we get older, our creatine levels drop. And I'm finding zero negative side effects. So it's easily tolerated. Again, this could now get into the placebo effect, but I am feeling a little more energetic at the gym. And again, that I think the studies in creatine kind of indicate that you have higher performance in the gym. But ultimately, could I look at a movement and accurately determine if there was an improvement? And I would say yes. And I can notice that because I'm really focusing on taking all the other supportive elements that could potentially help me through that cheating movement and removing it, and looking solely at that mind muscle connection and movements that I could not push out of before. Now I'm able to do that. And I'm not changing my training. I'm not changing my diet. Just that addition, I think, gave me that incremental acknowledgement that something here has changed slightly. So overall report card so far, positive, positive. And it wasn't necessarily in a weight training setting. So
Drew, I've got a question for you. Have you noticed, as a cyclist, I don't really want to gain body weight. Have you gained any body weight with it?
3 pounds. It was 3 pounds. Yeah. And again, you always have to take into consideration, especially with creatine, how much of that is water weight. So I had to track this over time. And I'd say my base weight has gone up 3 pounds. So now I'm staying at 3 pounds more than I would when I started. And I know you're supposed to drink more water with creatine, and I've been guilty of, yes, I'm drinking a little bit more water, but not enough to, I think, to substantially make that difference. Right. So it's a good question, because is the creatine actually creating muscle increase, or is it just by better hydrating the muscle, just making that muscle better and more efficient at pushing without changing the size? So that's an interesting thing to look at. I mean, if I gain 3 pounds, so it's legit, then that's more muscle.
Right.
Jeff?
So I want to give my brief experience with creatine. I quit taking all supplements for at least 10 years. And I was taking so many supplements that I didn't know what was working. And so about 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I decided to reintroduce creatine into my routine. Just because I knew all the benefits of creatine working in the industry and knowing all the research, all the science behind it. But so 2.5 years, 3 years ago, I brought creatine back into my routine. I started taking 10 grams a day. And within 3 days, my strength and my endurance went up about 10%. So something that I was getting 15 reps with, I was getting 17 reps with. And I will say I gained 2 or 3 pounds. I can't tell you exactly, but it was 2 or 3 pounds. The thing with creatine, it is intracellular. So whenever creatine basically retains water, but what most people don't realize is the muscles actually hold more water than fat does. So people say when you lose fat, you're losing water. Well, actually, the muscle holds more water than fat cells do. So you do want the hydration in the fats or in the muscle cells, and because it just makes a more efficient, stronger, healthier cell. So what happens with a lot of people when they take creatine, they do get slight water retention that is visible. And there's a way to mediate that. And instead of doing, let's say you're doing 5 grams a day, or I'm doing 10 grams a day, you want to divide that up into 3 doses a day, and that will usually alleviate the water retention that's held underneath the skin. So you could still get the benefits of the muscle, the increased cognition, the increased heart health. If you're getting the water retention under the skin, divide it up into 3 doses a day, and that usually fixes that. But I will say, it is based on the research, based on my experience, and based on yours, it is a complete muscle enhancer, neurological enhancer, cardiovascular enhancer. It's just, there is no negatives to taking creatine at all.
Well, that's been my experience. And if you don't mind, I got to swing back around. We're talking about with Brad being able to monitor his performance. Brad, I'm working on the left side of the body to try to, again, create that symmetry, both in size and in performance. When you're measuring your output, can you measure output per leg? In other words, as one leg's driving. So do you see any difference in your ability to drive out of that left leg or your weaker leg?
Yes, my left leg's a little weaker. The power meter on all of my bikes measures how much percentage goes to the left pedal, how much goes to the right pedal. And it's usually, 49, 51. Mm-hmm. It's usually 1% or 2 off, but it's never 50-50. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Good.
So you guys, this show's already been over an hour, which is great. A lot of great information. So I just want to talk about maybe something we're going to focus on for the next show. I decided I'm going to talk a little more on the subject of sprinting next show, get more into the details of it and the benefits I've experienced, and they're pretty big. But Brad, what were you thinking of focusing on next show?
I would like to discuss HRV. Like that's my number one metric that I use to tell. And you know what, guys? A lot of people, if you have a smartwatch, anybody that's got a smartwatch on is measuring HRV and maybe don't even know it. Like it's such a sensitive metric, and it really actually HRV knows you better than you know you. And wow. It does. It really does. Yeah. I guide.
So Brad, I want to say one thing. I want to say one thing before you talk more about that. I don't think most people know what the acronym HRV stands for. Can you tell them what HRV stands for?
Yeah, it stands for heart rate variability. So just real quickly, a little bit about what it is. If you go to the doctor and they check your pulse and they say your pulse is 60 beats per minute. So most people would think, okay, my heart's beating like a metronome, 1 beat every second. But that's not the case. Your heart will beat, and then maybe 1.2 seconds it'll beat again, and then maybe 1.6 seconds it'll beat again, and then maybe 0.8 seconds. So it's kind of all over the place. And the reason actually, you hope it's all over the place. That gives you a high HRV score, which means you're ready to train. So the reason it's all over the place is your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system are sending different inputs into your body, and they're both kind of having when they both kind of have a say in what's going on, then you've got a high heart rate variability. It really doesn't have anything to do with your heart. It's how well balanced your nervous system is, and it's using the heart as a tool, to measure that. It's fascinating. It really is. And with this cold plunge, with this cold plunge and sauna treatment that I've been doing, my HRV is going through the roof.
Wow,
it's crazy. It's higher than it's ever been. It's like spiking out in the 120s and 130s, which it's never been. The older you get, the lower your HRV drops. So,
well, think about this, Brad. Look what you're doing. You're doing something that typically most people don't do. Is you're taking your body into two extreme ranges of temperature, and that's forcing the body to have some adaptive process to deal with that. And so that's another reason probably to do it, because you're now training your body to do what it did when you were younger, to adapt to those extreme changes. Because I think as we get older, we don't want to get overly heated and we don't want to get overly cool, and so we lose that fitness, temperature fitness.
That's 100% right, Drew. The older you think about it, the older you get, you don't want to be cold, you don't want to be hot,
Right.
And absolutely.
Jeff, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to ask you guys questions. You guys are more intriguing to me than me, I can tell you. What I'm going to focus on, I think, is just continuing. I'm very intrigued with the fact that our upper bodies are able to maintain a higher level of mass than our lower bodies. And I'm going to continue down this road because it's such an important thing for us to keep that lower body mass. And so in future sessions, I may cover not only that, there's various elements I believe that are impacting. And so I may cover one of those or two of those elements per time. But I just want to dig into that a little bit more, because it's really important for us to maintain that.
Okay, great. So it's been an hour and 8 minutes of great information, and I just want to thank everybody for listening. And again, please forgive my internet connection; it's causing a lot of lagging on my part. So I want to thank you, Brad. Excellent information, Drew. Excellent information, and you guys have done great. I appreciate you guys, and thank you everybody for tuning in. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.